Ampire. Hey babies, 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 hey baby. Hi everyone, hi everyone, hi everyone, hi everyone, hi everyone. Callow is off this week. He picked a big, interesting week to take off here on this show with the start of training camp. Today was the official opening of it out in Ashburn without a practice today. Dan Quinn and Adam Peters spoke to the media, and I'm going to play some of the clips from it and give you all some reaction to what was going on out in Ashburn in a minute. And then John Keim's going to join me in about 20 minutes or so and get his just general reaction to everything that was said. And as we kind of baseline and table set the start of training camp, which begins in earnest tomorrow morning. The fans are not allowed out to any of the practices until this weekend. I believe it was Saturday. That's the first practice that they're allowed to come out. Don't quote me on that. It's either Saturday or Sunday. I don't remember. So don't go out there the next few days. The fans are not going to gain access to the facility, but I'll be able to go out there and watch practice. They're going to be practicing in the morning to try to beat the heat, which is, I think, good for all of us. And then we're going to start to kind of just get a sense of where this team is. As I mentioned earlier, Dan Quinn, Adam Peters both spoke to the media today. And, the first question after we got out of pleasantries and, what is this going to be? What is that going to be? So obviously topic one was what's going on with Jayden Daniels. Is he the starter, or when's he going to be named the starter? Or when is this team going to determine when he's ready to be the starter? And John Keim got one of the early questions in the press conference, and this is what he asked, and here is how Dan Quinn answered it.
What is the plan for Jayden as far as working with, how you talk about competition? What's that going to look like? Is he going to rotate? Is he going to work with the ones? How's that going to look?
Yeah, and I that's a good question, John, because it's probably leading to Jayden starting and when is that happening. So this is a great time to discuss it, and I want you to know it's not a secret, but it is a journey and a process. And so as we're going, when he's ready, we'll know, and when he's ready, he'll also know. But as far as the reps go, obviously with him and Marcus and moving around, there'll be certain days that will feature more of another. But like I said, I'm glad that you brought it up, and certainly not a secret. It's a journey and a process. And so through practices, through scrimmages and preseason games, all the way down, that's where the journey will take us. And then I'm not trying to hold back the info, but when we know, we'll say it.
John and I talked about this, and you'll hear this in a bit, and he used what I thought was really good terminology for it. He goes, when you get through all of the word salad, you'll be able to try to get to where you think the answer is. And I'll get to where my reaction to that in a minute. Let's just go through what he said, which is no one is being named the starting quarterback right now. No one is the number one, which is a tacit admission to that the expectation is he's going to, quote unquote, win this job sooner rather than later. They're not saying he is starting behind Mariota. They're not saying he's starting ahead of Mariota. He went out of his way to say there is going to be competition. When pressed on this later by Sam Fortier, the Washington Post, his quote about Jayden was, this is an extremely motivated player. And as we go through all of this, we're going to continue to focus on the things that are important, which is competition and development. And he said, we don't want to skip any steps with him. We just want to be able to move forward with him. And we're going to hit all these benchmarks and move in that direction. So when will we hear he's the starter, assuming nothing unforeseen happens during training camp, tweaked ankle or anything like that holds him back or anything of that nature? When will we start hearing this? Well, I think that this position leads us to, and the first time he's going to speak is towards the end of the week. So he'll be asked this question as well. And I assume that he's going to take whatever position he's going to take, but it's not going to be one where he says definitively I'm this or definitively I'm that. That this likely gets addressed in any real way will be after the joint practice with the Jets in a couple of weeks. And if he is going to play in the Jets preseason game, probably after that, where we stand. So I think we are a good 2.5 weeks away from even getting a guess at which will he be starting against the Buccaneers? Because they're basically pushing it back till then. That's the first time we might get a guess. And it might even extend to the week after because they have a joint practice in Miami and a second preseason game in Miami, which is once again a big if whether he would play in that. If he's going to be the starter, I would have a hard time buying that he's going to start against the Patriots in the lone home game of the preseason, which is the preseason finale. But I guess we'll just have to see if they determine if reps matter for him at that point. But we'll get there when we get there. They're not saying he's behind. He's not. Like, I was out there in the spring. He looked as good as Mariota in the limited amount of time that we saw him, albeit not in what anybody would describe as full practices, full go, full speed, all of that stuff. His processing looks great. His ability to throw the ball looks great. He's everything that they said he was going to be. His work ethic is everything that it's been billed to be. Quietly and not so quietly behind the scenes, they keep talking about what a job he's done. So I firmly believe that he's going to end up being the starter, short of unforeseen circumstances, but they just don't want to do it now. And they're not suggesting he's behind anybody. Like, go listen to what Jared Mayo, the head coach of the Patriots, said today about Drake May, Jacoby Brissett. He outwardly said as they opened training camp that right now Jacoby Brissett is ahead of Drake May, which is not a surprise if you've been following that story. But he outwardly said that May is going to have to do some work to catch up to Brissett and eventually surpass him. If not, he has a redshirt season up there with New England. In this case, that's not what's going on here. Like, Daniels is going to play and is likely going to be the starter ASAP. The question is just when and what benchmarks and what moments do they need to see to try to make that happen. And my larger takeaway from all of it is it all just falls in line with the way that they've kind of handled Daniels from the get-go. They have gone out of their way to not pressurize the situation around him. He is selected with number 2 overall pick. He's the Heisman Trophy winner. His stats are outrageous. His highlights are outrageous. He's a dual threat quarterback. They haven't had a player like this with these capabilities really since Robert Griffin III has come in here. And they have decided collectively, organizationally, not to thrust him out there and start pressurizing the situation of being the franchise quarterback, the answer. I mean, it's hard anywhere, but it's particularly hard here. 90-plus-year-old franchise. We've been waiting for this guy to come for a long time. Hopefully it's him. A lot of our hopes are embodied in how he performs. He knows this. They know this. But the reality is we have to get around to hopefully allowing him to mature into this space. They have not done a bunch of interviews with him. They have not done a bunch of marketing campaigns with him. They did not send him out to the draft party. They have not done a lot of things to try to pressurize the situation any more than it really needs to be. At some point in September, it's going to be, we can't hold you back anymore. You got to go out there and do it. But I think that they're just holding it back for as long as possible, keeping the pressure away for as long as possible, and allowing him to just mature into the situation that it is, which is go win the job, win the confidence of the coaching staff, win the confidence of Kingsbury, win the confidence of the team leaders, and then we're going to put you out there, and you're going to know when you've reached that point. My gut says it's going to happen before we get to the Tampa game, but I guess we'll just have to see. All right. In the meantime, there were a couple of other notable things to talk about. And one that I thought was a big table set for the season, which is, what are your expectations? What does a successful season look like to you? And, I've been kind of wondering and waiting, what are they going to say about this? Like, the easy answer for any team or any coaching staff or the players or anybody is going to be like, let's go to the playoffs. Let's go win the Super Bowl. That's what a successful season looks like. This team has gone out of its way to downplay all of this stuff. Like, yes, this is really exciting. Yes, we all, want to win. We're here to build an organization, but we're here to build an organization. And so when asked about this, Dan Quinn and Adam Peters shared their thoughts on what they thought. What does a successful season look like?
For both of you, this is the time of year where people ask predictions. Well, how is this team going to finish? Things like that. I won't ask for records. But for you guys, what counts as a successful season this year?
I think number one, we want to start off and make sure like our identity and who we are and how we play, that has to come along strong, Ben. And that part, if you get that first and get that right, that's when a lot of the success will follow. But you can't put the record before you have the identity and who you are. And so I'm hopeful that when you and our fans and families see us play, they see that identity coming to life, the speed, the physicality, the winning football in the most critical moments. Those are all the things that are going to make up our identity, and we've got to use this time to start establishing that in the very best of ways.
Yeah, we've both at our press conference when we first started, right? That was the thing we both said is you're going to see how we play, you're going to feel how we play, and that's the first thing. And how fast or slow that goes is so many different things that are variables and all that. But I can tell you that you're going to see a great effort team, a competitive team playing fast and physical, and we've seen that out there all spring, and excited to see it here in camp.
Adam, you turned over, I think, 2/3 of this roster. I'm wondering kind of how you feel about the kind of the group you brought in, the 90 guys who are here, and going into camp, how much change there has been.
Yeah, I think first and foremost, like DQ said earlier, we brought in a type of player we thought, as much as we can that are commanders. And I think you guys saw that a little bit out in the spring. And so we're thrilled about the 90 guys we have here. We're always, DQ preaches competition every day, so we're always going to look at ways to improve the roster. But as it sits now, we feel great about the guys we have. And in my experience, just seeing what we did out in the spring, what you guys did out in the spring, the way we practiced, the way they gelled together really fast was really, really impressive. And it just speaks to the type of coaches we have and the type of players we have.
And Dan, as someone coming as a new coach, do you like the clean slate aspect of it, of having a group that there's not a whole lot of kind of holdovers?
I think when you're starting anything, there's a freshness and a newness that goes with that. I love each of the years, because not every year is exactly the same. So knowing that there's some new connections and new people here, those relationships to start them is good. But I'd be also remiss in year 2 and 3, those get stronger and deeper and as you're going. But you only get one first shot with a whole new group, and we're not going to miss that shot.
Okay, so that's Dan Quinn and Adam Peters from their press conference today at camp, which begins. There were a couple of things that happened as well in the press conference, and oftentimes it's not, what exactly is asked, but how they answer it and what they kind of indirectly share when they're talking about their roles. And those are the things that really stood out to me today. There were a few key tenets that kind of came up today when we talk about roster resetting, roster rebuilding, culture rebuilding, what expectations are, what are reasonable expectations to have, what are we looking at for this fall to remind ourselves that we have a successful start. Does the record really ultimately matter? Yes, but does getting to the playoffs really matter? I'm not sure. We're kind of in this nebulous place. But Peter said a couple of things that I thought was really interesting. He brought up, that all of these different people have been brought into his front office, that he went to Josh Harris and the ownership group and said, we need these people. We need, to come in here and to help us build what we want to build, which is, a world-class organization. He said, we looked around the league and we saw the teams, what their front offices looked like. We wanted to have something like that in our building as well. And they've been given the resources to do it. And then he went out of his way to discuss some of the jobs that people have and that they are prepared to look not just for the now to get better, but for people to make them better into the future. And they're looking 2-3 years ahead. And so they just kept talking about how the systems are in place, the processes are in place. Everybody understands what their role is in all of this. And while it's all very new, the front office is new, the coaching staff is new, the vast majority of the team is new. Many people on the other side of the building are new, that this process is going to get started, and there's going to be a learning curve for them. They feel like they've gotten off to a great start. They feel like they've put a team out there they're going to be proud of. They feel like they're going to grow together, learn together, have fun together, and hopefully get some wins together this year. But they're openly talking about what the future looks like. Not necessarily putting a lot of pressure on this quarterback or this team or this roster or this staff or themselves. They're saying we're thinking about this in a couple of years. And so the core things that really came out of this to me was they're thinking about the future short and long term. They're really thinking about identity, that they really want to know what is their identity going to be. Quinn clearly has an idea. Peters thinks he has an idea too. Play fast, execute at the highest level, Don't think when you go, just go and do it. And then there is the develop leadership part of this. Quinn brought up, he hopes somebody at the end of camp asks him, who are the leaders that have emerged? And he says, I'll have too many names to name at that point, because no one asked him it specifically, but who are the leaders of the team? Who are going to be the people that stand out to him at the end of all of this, that are going to be the people that make this team better and give this team an opportunity to win? So the table is set. And with that, I'll continue this conversation with John Keim of ESPN next. Bram watch the show, ESPN 630, the Sports Capital. All right, here with John Keim from ESPN, John Keim Report, day one of training camp, which was just actually a press conference with Adam Peters and Dan Quinn. Practice starts tomorrow. You got the first question. You got to ask him about Jayden Daniels, and you got what I thought was a uniquely vague answer of, we're going to go through a journey, and then we'll see where the journey takes us. And when, I think the quote was, when he's ready, he'll know it, and when he's ready, we'll know it too. So Jayden Daniels is not anointed the starter, but I don't know. What did you think about what that answer was?
I think they want to make sure. But, you kind of parcel out some of the word salad with it and dancing around it, because we all know eventually he's going to be the guy. Like, that's for sure.
Against Tampa.
At some point. But I can't, nobody can say for sure, because you still want to see how he does during the joint practices, right? There's two of those. See how he does. There's no rush to name him. And I would say, compared to the past, I think it's a good approach. Make sure he's ready. So I think that's all it is. It's, and shoot, Bram, we were out in the spring, he looked better than Marcus Mariota in the spring for what we saw. And how they process it, I don't know, but I know that he looks better to the naked eye.
When you say make sure he's ready, what do you think they mean when they say that?
I think just putting him through different situations. I mean, all we've seen him is in the underwear Olympics in the spring, which is, no pads, right? So how does he do when you get into the padded practices? Also, again, the joint practices, when he faces another defense other than his own. I think those are the things that if I'm a coach, and I know for them, they want to see that. And then do you see the continued development from him? And we saw that in the spring, so I don't know that there would be any different, but they're going to start throwing a few more things at him. And how does he process it? What's the processing speed like, and the growth? So that's what they want to see. But I think those joint practices will be very key in this situation to be able to gauge how he looks against a different team.
Yeah, I don't think they needed to name him the starter, and I thought the way that they couched it was interesting, because there was no insinuation he's behind, there was no insinuation he's ahead. There's no they went out of their way to say this is an extremely motivated, confident player. And I think it was Sam Fortier who asked, why aren't you just naming him now? And his answer was, he's extremely motivated, but we don't want to fast track development here. Right. So it is word salad, but I think it's a positive sign, or maybe it just falls in line with they've tried to depressurize the situation the whole time, and maybe they're just kind of continuing that process through the early part of the preseason.
Yeah, and I think that's the case. And you're right. They've gone out of their way to not make him the face of the franchise at this point. And that's from when you see promotional material. Typically, he's not good. I don't remember him being featured in those materials, whereas in the past, he most certainly would have been. And most teams would have done that. And, I don't think he's going to do one-on-one interviews in camp. They want to just kind of limit the pressure on him to be that guy. Go win the job. And Adam Peters said, it's you want to let those things happen naturally. And I think that, which I don't, there's nothing wrong with that approach. There's no reason they have to name him right now at all. There's no game to play, right? So let it happen. Because if you go out now and say, well, he's the guy, and I know, I don't know how many people are saying it, but if they said he's the guy and then he starts to struggle, then you got to pull back, and that's a harder thing to do. Yeah. So I think I don't mind the approach at all. Again, those joint practices are so crucial, and I think one of the things that you have to work to do, and I sometimes, I certainly feel like at times in the last couple of years that they wouldn't always see guys honestly. They saw sometimes what they wanted to see to fill that the narrative of who they did, whether it's Emmanuel Forbes, Sam, whoever it was. And I think you need to see things honestly and get as much information as you can before getting there. But again, whether it's Tampa in week 1, the Giants in week 2, he's going to be the guy. Obviously.
Adjacent to him is the Ayuk stuff. Obviously, they're friends. They played together. It's funny when people keep talking about they were teammates. They were teammates 5 years ago. It was actually a long time now. It wasn't that short time ago. But they have a deep friendship. Obviously, recently Ayuk, who's done these thirst trap videos with him, about wanting to come here. Obviously, wants to, and wants a different contract and isn't getting it from San Francisco. But the one where he posted a picture of a Commanders practice, and it obviously was recent because Jayden Daniels is in it, felt very troublesome and a little over the line to me personally. Adam Peters asked about it, quickly just said, we handled it unconcerned. What do you make of just that hiccup and how that they've kind of just publicly dealt with it?
Yeah, I mean, and as he said, they handled it internally. It was not a good look. You shouldn't be sharing that stuff. I don't know how many players do that, but if you are doing that, you don't want the guy you're sharing it with to then post it on social media. That was not good. So, it was a rookie hiccup for sure. And it's funny because I see a lot of people talking about Ayuk and like he shouldn't surround. I've never heard that Ayuk's a bad guy. Ayuk's trying to get leverage for a new contract. That's what he's doing. Like, he wants to be in San Francisco despite all this stuff. Like, he has publicly said he wants to be there. He wants a new contract from there. That's all he's trying to get. And he kind of used his friend Daniels to try to gain some leverage with the 49ers.
Oh, you don't think he wants to be here?
No, I think he wants to be in San Francisco.
Why?
Because he has said that. I think he's using this to gain leverage. He even said that as well. He said, I'm trying to do these things to get leverage. He wants, if the Niners presented him a contract tomorrow, he will sign it, period. That's what he wants. Like, that's everything I've heard from people out there. So while if you're not going to be in San Francisco, if they don't want you, then I think he'd want to come here because of his friend Daniels. So, but I do think, I don't think he has written off San Francisco at all. I think if they came tomorrow and said, well, here's your $28 million a year deal, I think he'll sign it.
Yep.
That's the sense I've gotten from talking to people, certainly who know a lot more than I do about the situation.
I have no expectation he gets traded here. I want to make that very clear, and I have felt that way for a while.
Yeah, I don't see it at all. This is the Niners are a team trying to win a Super Bowl. They're not going to trade one of their top offensive threats for a future draft pick. It makes zero sense. Now, if some team came and said, hey, we'll give you this impact defensive player that maybe they need, whether it's a defensive end or something like that, maybe they would entertain that because now you have a guy that can help you still win a Super Bowl. These guys don't have that guy. So they can only give you a future draft pick. It doesn't make any sense for them to do that at this point.
Okay. Let's talk about the roster in general. When Quinn was asked about it, one of the things he said that really stood out to me was what may be perceived as a weakness externally, maybe something that we think is a strength internally. What do you think he's talking about? I have a guess at what that is, but what do you think he's talking about?
What do you think he's talking about?
Corner.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I don't know because I know I would say with St. Juice, for example, the film wasn't good. They saw the film. I think they got intrigued by him this spring because of the length and he has pretty good feet, and he that's one. So I think there's some intrigue with him. Forbes, I'm not sure. I'm not going to that point yet. I think because of his ability to take the ball away, I think there's again intrigue there. And he was a first round pick. Whether the Commanders took him there, somebody else is going to take him pretty high in the draft. So it's not like he's not talented. So there is talent.
Yeah, I don't think don't revise this. He wasn't getting out of the first round. Right. Maybe he went a little higher than some people expected. Like same thing with Dotson. Maybe he went a little higher than some people expected. He wasn't going to fall that much farther than that.
Right, and even with Dotson, I remember talking to a coach like, yeah, I didn't feel comfortable with him at 16, but at 22 or 23, I would have been okay. Okay, you're talking
right. What are you talking about?
Right.
Yeah.
So the only other spot where you say, well, what's the weakness? Well, I think you can look at a couple spots then. Like, is receiver a weakness or a strength? Because Terry McLaurin, I think that's to me that's a question more than a weakness or a strength because you have McLaurin who's really good. questions on Dotson, questions about like McCaffrey, De'Ami Brown, Zacchaeus. But then the other spot that if you look at what's the biggest perceived weakness would be offensive line.
Yes.
And I think when you look at that, they strengthened the interior. However, questions at left tackle and questions at right tackle too. Like Andrew Wiley has to play better. So maybe it is corner, and then what would be the other position where you look at it like that?
I don't know. I think like those are the three positions that people look at and have questions about. And I say corner because one, I think it fits into their strength. This is what they've developed, this group, right? There are plenty, and they have cap room to do it, plenty of high-tier, high-caliber veteran cornerbacks that have been available or to this day are still available, and they haven't jumped to get any of them. So there's a part of me that goes, I think that and they'll be proven right or wrong when they get on the field, but like, I think they think this group's better collectively than people think it is, and I guess we'll find out when we play.
And I still have, I guess I have so many questions, but it doesn't matter what my questions are. It matters about theirs.
Correct.
And I think like Samerstil, they clearly love. Then you have Davis and
Igbenogany. I've been working on this one because I got to call his name. Yeah. Noah I. Yeah.
Noah I. Yeah. So they know though. They brought him over from Dallas, and
he also is a former first-round pick.
Right.
I know he hasn't.
Right. Who hasn't done it?
Correct. But he's a high-level athlete talent.
Right. And Mike Davis, has had some good years in the NFL too. So I think the depth there maybe is better, but I still would say there's definite questions about the starters. And then the other thing is like, how do they fit in the system? And if they're trying to get an attacking system, that's where Forbes you would think would do well. I think they probably feel better about especially. I'm not going to say I don't know that they feel great about the line, but I think they certainly like Brandon Coleman. And I think the other part of it is, and they kind of alluded to this, is how does then the system and the scheme then, he talked about this, like how do you emphasize what they can do versus focus on what they can't do? And there were too many times last year with that offensive line, what they didn't do well was pass block, right? And what they asked them to do 70% of the time was pass block. It was horrendous coaching. So if you know that, then can you flip that? Not 70% runs, but like if you get a little bit more, normal, then I think you have a better shot to make them look better, right?
Yeah, I agree.
I don't know, Bram. Like it could be corner, and it's like, but because it's hard to make the case. I guess there's just so many questions either one. But you're right. That could be what you said. It could just be as make as much sense as any.
Yeah, I mean, on the offensive line, like Peters was asked specifically about Cornelius Lucas because I think we all perceived that they could upgrade specifically at that position. And he basically said, we talked to the previous staff, we saw how he worked, we know what kind of person he is, and I, like you, I think we'll both agree here, we like him. I think he's a good player. I think the question is 17 games worth of starting at that position, and no one's pretending he's a Pro Bowler. Right. So do they have an answer if he isn't he's certainly not a long-term answer, but do they have an answer if he's what we think on the outside that maybe 17 games isn't the answer with him? Do they have that answer with him? And I'm not sure that they're not answering that now, but they seem pleased enough at this point to go into camp with the line that they have.
Yeah, and Brandon Coleman was picked for a reason, and when you look at his stuff, like he has good feet and he has good length. He's just a little bit shorter for a tackle at 6'4.5" or so. Typically, they're getting you in that 6'5", 6'6" range, but his length is right in line with it's a good length for a tackle. So, and he has a footwork. So I think he's intriguing because of that. When could he ascend to that role? And if with Lucas, if you think, all right, Lucas, I know the previous staff would look at Lucas as like a 6-7 game type starter, and then the play would start to go down because, for whatever reason, and. But could Coleman be ready at that point? And that's one thing. I think that's hard to know because, and so that's what maybe it does go back to the cornerback spot, like you said, because there's no way they can really tell about the O-line because, as they said, that's one of the areas where you'd be behind in evaluating because you're not able to put them in situations this spring to really gauge where they're truly at. And so we'll see that more when the pass comes.
I agree. I want to talk some big picture stuff, like where some of the key tenets of what I took away from what I heard today, and I like them. One, when asked what's a good season, he said our identity is going to come out. That's what Dan Quinn said. So they're not putting a record on it. They're not putting false, promises out there. And they're saying we want to see us become us, which I like. Adam Peters talked a lot. I mean, I got a lot of insight today. Like, just kind of slipped a few times. Like, we are looking 2-3 years ahead. It's not just like we want to win now, but we are looking 2-3 years ahead. And then he also just kind of listed out, you know, I don't think purposefully, but just said, we're ready because people's jobs and what they're supposed to do we have a process already in a very short period of time. We hired this person to do this person to do that, this person to do this. Like, there is systems in place. I think they're thinking about this the right way. I like it. You know, like, I just think the general overall, they're all very excited. Quinn's an excitable person. Quinn called this the most excited he's been to come into a camp. Peter said that. Like, but I think they're thinking about it in a way that is realistic and thoughtful about the future, not just the now.
I think they're being allowed to do that too. And I think that's important. Like, when people come in here, like, there was always pressure to get it right now. And with Josh Harris, you come in, this new group, he went through the process in Philly. He's okay with, like, playing things out, and these guys are taking that long-term approach, which there were people that would give lip service to it before, but it never really meshed, right? You never really felt like there was too much of a trying to do things now while planning ahead, and it would result in 9-7, excuse me, 8-8, whatever it was. And but I like the long-term approach that they're taking here, and you can see it. And that's why, like, this year, I don't know how good they're going to be, but I like the long-term approach. So I think they have a much better chance of long-term success than they've had in 24 years because of that. And so I think, but it comes from Josh Harris has that approach, Adam Peters has been with the organization with that approach, and Dan Quinn is a good one to do that, because this year, establish who you are and build on that. And I think, you know, for fans, they might say, like, they just want to win. I get it, and they should be.
So do I.
Yeah, and I trust me, I get it very much. Like, they've heard this so many times over the years, but this is the first time I feel like they're set up to actually play that through.
Or try to do it. Yeah, I mean, like, you still have to try to do it. You have to get the roster decisions right. I think more and more and more listening to them, too, it makes so much sense that when they came in, they didn't swing for the fences on a free agent. They didn't spend a tremendous amount of money on term with any particular free agent. I think they're going to say, we brought in these people that we think are part of the future for us. If they earn their way into that, we'll reward them with that. We have the cap room to do it, but we're not walking in here shot out of a cannon thinking we can change things overnight. And it kind of fits with exactly how they've rebuilt this roster, which is it's baselined, and there are really very few promises to anybody on it.
Correct. And I think that's the good thing. And there shouldn't be any promises. Like, if you're here from the past, if you're Fedarian Mathis, Jamin Davis, guys like that, have a good camp, because there's no loyalty to them. They don't care that you were a second-round pick or a first-round pick, whomever it is, whether it's them or De'Ami Brown, some people who, you know, and actually Jamin Davis of that group has been far better than those other two. You know what I mean? And so,
yes.
But the point is, they're
asking a lot of him too. They're asking him to change positions.
Well, and right, and they also strengthen linebacker. So it's like, if he doesn't do this, is he okay being a backup linebacker, or are they going to, you know? But for him, it's going to be dependent on how does he transition to defensive end to add that value. But the point is, like, if he's not, you know, what do you do? Could you trade some of these guys and just start recouping and building that way? But they're not beholden to the past. They're not beholden to somebody's draft status from the past. Only their guys. And I think they brought in what appears to be a strong class because of so many high picks. And that's the way you build the foundation. And so that's why, like, you go back to the Ayuk trade, like, I don't see them wanting to trade high picks plus give up $28 million when you don't know what it's going to look like after this year. Like, what if you do all that and you still need a tackle, you still need a cornerback, you still need a defensive end? Like, those are premium positions that it's hard to then go pay all that, to invest all that in a terrific playmaker, but a receiver, right? So in one position. And so I think, like, but I do like their approach, man.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, like, I keep hearing the comparison to Houston last year. Like, could they be Houston last year? I think that's an incredible outcome. I mean, short of, would I pick them to win the division right now based on who's in their division? Probably not, you know, but if they could somehow slip into the playoffs with this team, it would feel very ahead of schedule. And I think they'd be honest and tell you that, because if they're sitting here today, they're not sitting here projecting we're going to be able to do any of these things now. We're going to learn, grow, and as they put it, build their identity.
Right. And yeah, I mean, I think if they win 7 games, that'd be good. Houston was in an easier division, and so that's part of the problem. You have 2 legit teams that could come out of the NFC this year in their division, in the Eagles and the Cowboys. And if all goes right for the Eagles based on what they did, they could be a legit. I could see them winning the Super Bowl. So if it all goes right, so the Texans didn't have to deal with that. So that's part of the difference here. But I know, second overall pick, the quarterback, and all that all fits. I think for people to, and I'm probably going to write a story on this too at some point, like, can they duplicate that? It'd be very difficult for that. That's one of the main reasons. But also, the Texans had a young pass rusher as well in Will Anderson. They got lucky in the draft with Tank Dell, the receiver, as well. So it was as much C.J. Stroud and then a new coach. So you can I could see a good turnaround. Maybe you win a couple more games just because you're better coached. And I think they will be better coached. I can never underscore the difference in the staffs that I think that exists, and that how much difference it can make. If they win 7 games, is that a good year? If you're competitive throughout the year, So I don't know. I think what they what you want to look like is a professional team.
Yeah.
And you want guys who, like, okay, 7 or 8 wins or whatever, but you can clearly say Jayden Daniels can play. These young guys can play. They just need more.
Yeah. I mean, I think, for me, in the end, every year, you probably get this a million times too. Everybody wants to know, what do they look like? What do you think they're going to do? How are they going to be? And this is the first year, and we've seen a lot of change, that I really can't even answer that question. I don't know. Everything is so very different. But what I always go back to is, this quarterback's a high-level athlete. I think he makes us exciting, and then the ceiling is who knows, dependent on how quickly it kind of takes for him. And if he is in place and he is what they think he's going to be, we're going to be good. I mean, we haven't had a quarterback like that in a while. But secondarily, what I really like here is, and I'll go back to all these processes, people know what their jobs are, there's an investment in resources. When Peter says, I need these people to help me build this, he's given those resources. And so while they all kind of figure this out in year 1, what I feel like is, when there are mistakes, and there's going to be, or when there are gaps that need to be filled, it appears as if this organization's ready to take on those challenges, maybe differently than some of the previous administrations.
Well, I think the support's, like you said, the support is much better. And I was thinking about this when, when Adam Peters talking about the waiver wire and this and that, he points out Lance Newmark and David Blackburn, who have this great experience in these areas, and those are the people he's now trusting. That's a pretty good twosome right there. So I think they're better suited to then find more guys, and it doesn't mean you're going to always unearth these gems. I just think they'll be pretty highly prepared, and not that and I can't say that they weren't necessarily prepared. I just think that the process with the front office coaching staffs was not the ideal one the last couple of years, and so I think it's just better set up to build the roster. I think people know exactly what their roles are. Adam Peters in charge of football. Dan Quinn is the coach, right? And there's not going to be a bleeding of roles into one. And who's actually making the decision? In the past, is it Marty Herney, or is it Martin Mayhew, or is it Ron? So there was too many questions like that. The lines are, the roles are much more defined than they have been in a while.
All right, practice 1 tomorrow. Here we go.
There you go. Giddy up.
All right, thanks, John. All right, welcome back. Bram wants to show ESPN 630, the Sports Capital. All right, let's finish up our thoughts of day 1 of training camp, which was just a press conference today. The first full practice is tomorrow morning, not open to the fans. But we'll give question of the day because Dan Quinn calls it question of the day. You'll hear it. It's about round 2 for Dan Quinn as he starts over, second go as a head coach. Got to the Super Bowl with the Atlanta Falcons early in his tenure. Things went the other way a couple of years later. Ended up becoming a coordinator again. Had a lot of success with with the Dallas defense. We know this very well over the last few years. And now he talked introspectively a lot back in the spring about wanting this opportunity again, getting this opportunity again, hoping that he could reprove himself, doing a lot of work on the blind spots that he felt like he had in his first go around. And then he was asked this question today about, okay, you just had your first off season of round 2. How'd it go?
Candy Waller, Bowie TV. This one is for you, Coach Quinn. Reflecting on OTAs, was there anything that you said, you know what, that didn't work out so well? Maybe we won't do too much more of that, or something that went really well and said we got to do more of that?
All right, Candy, good. That is a good question. You're really making me think. I like it, Candy. Give me a second. Things that I definitely liked going through the spring. We took time before we got to football with the, not just the free agents that came or the veterans that were here, to get to know the man before the ball player. And I think that was an important process. So much as a coach, you just want to get right into the football and finding out somebody's why, more of their background, what do they stand for, why were some of the things important. I would say that's a good lesson, in building something. From a leadership standpoint, early on, I think in my life, I thought leading, how is it me leading others? And what I found out through processes is real leading takes place when you can identify and develop the leaders within themselves. And so I'm pleased with what we're seeing in that spot. I'm hopeful at the end of camp you ask me, hey, Dan, who are the leaders? And your hand cramps because I'm listing so many players. Things that I wish I could do differently as you're going to go, probably those are more like practice oriented. Could I have added more or less into it? I think one of the real fun things for everybody to watch is the addition of some special teams plays this year. And I know it's been a story of the off season, but I was pleased with the amount of work that we put in, but time will tell if it was enough work, Candy.
He actually expanded more on that. Kudos to Candy, too, for a great question. But he expanded more on that. I'll talk more about that as camp kind of progresses and we start to watch around the league how everybody's handling the new kickoff rules. The punts haven't really changed, but the kickoffs have, and I actually feel smart today. I've been talking about this from the early offseason. Like, I don't think that the primary kickoff returner is the same skill set as it used to be. It's more of a running back or a 2-cut type player as opposed to the 1-cut and go type player. So we're going to have to see how that kind of materializes, but I appreciate Dan Quinn talked a little bit about that as well. Yes, leadership, growing leadership, developing leadership, getting to know people, having personal relationships with the players. These are the things that were talked about Quinn going into his hiring. All his ex-players, all the ex-coaches, they all called this a home run because he gets to know you. He becomes someone who becomes a mentor to you, a friend to you, father figure, I guess, in some cases. And in this case, he kept reiterating, and this is where the best teams are. The best teams are led from within the locker room. And hopefully we're going to find out who those people are. There are natural people that come to mind that might, be the leaders of this team. The hope is Jayden Daniels will become a leader of this team. Terry McLaurin likely now. John Allen likely is a leader now. Who else? Bobby Wagner likely is a leader now, but he's new to the building. Of course, most of the people are new to the building. So it'll be an interesting thing to see how that all kind of develops here throughout the next coming months. I mentioned this earlier. Jacoby Brissett is likely going to be the starter here early for the Patriots. So Drake May, who was the 3rd overall pick, is going to be a developmental quarterback at least through the summer. And Brissett, the former quarterback here, back up here, is going to get his opportunity to start again up in New England, and we'll see how that goes for him. One other name that I just want to keep an eye on, Hassan Reddick. I mean, this has kind of been not much of a secret. The Jets let Bryce Huff get to free agency. The Eagles signed him to a big deal. I remember back in free agency, he was someone I was earmarking as someone I might be interested in for the Commanders before they signed Dorrance Armstrong. And so that left a hole for the Jets. And so they looked to fill it by acquiring Hassan Reddick, who was traded from the Eagles. So they basically swapped these defensive ends. Reddick is in the final year of his contract. Reddick never showed up to anything in training camp. And Reddick is now holding out of camp, and according to Pro Football Talk, is not going to show up until he gets a new contract. That's the assumption of what it's based on. He's in the final year. He's making something like in the mid-teens or whatever that is. He's just a name I would keep an eye on because as this team talks about improving its positioning, improving its roster at all ends, Redick is a very, very effective player. And in a short-term situation might be an answer. Washington does sit with a lot of cap room as they enter the summer to make a move for the right person. If that right person were to somehow be made available, I'm not suggesting that he definitively is, but I think we all know they could use some help on the edge opposite of Armstrong. And if the Jets just can't figure it out with him, there might be a deal to be had if Redick is open to the type of contract that would fit within the short-term, long-term plans for the Commanders. So just a name that I would keep an eye on here early in camp. If they can't quite figure out what to do with him and how that is going to work out for them. So we'll keep an eye on that one as well. And then tomorrow, got to remind myself, make a note of this. The hot and heavy turn this into an 18-game season is ramping up. I mean, once Roger Goodell started talking about it in the preseason, I think you knew where that was heading. So we'll talk about that tomorrow and the week as we progress. But tomorrow, full day training camp recap out from Ashburn. I'll have that for you tomorrow at 3. Everybody have a great day. Bram Washington Show, ESPN 630 Sports Capital.